Science Squad. Porpoises in Peril. Chapter 1. Jada sprinted into the headquarters of the Global Environmental Research Agency known as JERA. She ran up 5 flights of steps, opened the door labeled Training, and saw her Science Squad colleagues sitting around the lab tables, flipping through a fat pile of papers. Their new assignment. "Thank you for joining us," Professor Q said. "Aw, I lost," said Cam, looking dejected. "Lost what, a rare plant?" asked Jada as she slipped onto a chair and pulled a tablet from her backpack. Cam was a botanist and had a backyard greenhouse full of rare plants. "No, I lost the bet with Kate," said Cam. "I bet that you'd be late for our meeting, and now I have to buy her lunch." Cam sighed. "But speaking of plants, I have a new one that you have to see. Hold on," said Kate. "If he starts talking about plants, our meeting will last twice as long." Kate's dark eyes sparkled while Reggie, the fourth member of the squad, chuckled. The professor pushed the forward button on her wheelchair and glided closer to the others. She moved her long braid from her left shoulder to her right shoulder. That was the signal that she was ready to discuss an important environmental problem. She looked straight at them and said, "Sick porpoises." Reggie snapped his pencil in half, and his shoulders tensed. He hated to hear about any animal being sick, whether a wild one or a pet. Professor Q continued. Local officials spotted several porpoises near an island off of the northern coast of Taiwan, exhibiting uncharacteristic behavior. Because the porpoises have been losing weight quickly, the officials believe that something or someone has contaminated the local food supply of these sea animals. There is a risk that the porpoise population will decline, and that eventually all the porpoises will die, so the officials have asked for our help. I do not have to tell you the importance of maintaining the proper ecological balance in the world's environment. One mishap in one part of the globe can have disastrous effects on the opposite side of the world. The Science Squad members looked at each other. They knew how important this was. "When do we leave?" Reggie asked excitedly. "Your flight departs in 2 hours, Professor Q answered. "I've made airline and hotel reservations for you, and your JERA credit cards are loaded with enough money for living expenses and any emergencies that might arise. Jada has all the information on her tablet, and the rest of you have hard copies. Study it on your flight. Oh, and good luck." After their 11-hour flight from Los Angeles to Taipei, then a 2-hour flight on a tiny, shaky plane, and then a long moonlit walk, the Science Squad finally checked into the tiny bamboo inn on a small island in the waters between Taiwan and Japan. "How do you get an executive suite?" Cam asked Jada hopefully. Jada snorted with laughter. "An executive suite, Cam?" She teased. "This inn only has 4 rooms, and we've got them all booked. I'll meet you outside on the terrace in 30 minutes. She headed off to her room to shower and change, and then gathered her gear and headed out to the terrace. Jada was the first one there, and she sat down while the owner of the inn brought fresh fish, vegetables, and fruit juice for the team. One by one, the team emerged from their rooms and sat down, ready to start working. Soon munching could be heard across the terrace as the squad members ate their delicious dinner. "Okay, it's time to formulate a plan," Jada announced, putting down her knife and fork. She powered up her tablet and plugged into the satellite receiver, one of the gadgets given to her by Professor Q. After all, there was no way to get a wireless connection on the island. Cam flipped open his sleek laptop with the Science Squad logo on the cover. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's start with what we know," Jada said. Reggie pulled the paperwork from Professor Q out of his bag and began by referring to the report. "There are a lot of sick porpoises swimming in these waters. which is unusual because the porpoise population has been healthy and stable over the last 10 years, said Reggie. Which means something has changed to make the porpoises sick. Some kind of change in their environment, Kate added. Jada busily typed on her tablet. So how do we find out what caused the balance to shift? Reggie twirled his pencil over his fingers. Well, first we need to actually see the porpoises. Cam interrupted. Someone down on the beach might have noticed something. Maybe we should head down there when it's light tomorrow morning and talk to people on the beach. Kate looked up from the notes Professor Q had given them. It says here that Dr. Vludman reported the problem. There's a cell phone number, and he has a little research station down by the beach. Let's go down and talk to him first thing in the morning. Reggie nodded. But for now, we should go to bed, he said. The team said goodnight to one another and headed back to their tiny room. Chapter 2. The next morning, the team stood outside the front of the inn and looked around at the small town in daylight. There wasn't much to it. The small inn, some houses, and a few other guest houses that served the tourists who came mainly to see the porpoises. There were hardly any people in sight, and the beach was a 2-mile walk from the town. Outside, in front of the inn, Reggie found a taxi to take them to the beach. But just as he opened the door, a man carrying a briefcase came from nowhere, rushed past him, and jumped in. Kate noticed the letter DDJ written in small letters on the man's briefcase, and a whiff of citrus and cedar floated out the window behind him. Reggie stood open-mouthed, watching the taxi speed off. "That's rude," muttered Cam, wrinkling his nose at the smell. He spotted 4 rickety, old-fashioned bikes at the front of the hotel. Nodding to Reggie, he said, "We can use these bikes to get to the beach. That will solve our transportation problem." After a bumpy, uncomfortable ride on the old bikes, they reached the beach and quickly located Dr. Vludman's research station. They approached and gently pushed open the door to the small, weather-beaten hut. Dr. Vludman looked extremely relieved to see them. "You must be the science squad," he said. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Stacks of papers cluttered his desks, and charts and coastal maps covered every inch of wall space in the tiny wooden hut. Dr. Vludman smiled and peered at the team through thick lenses. "I'm so grateful that Professor Q sent you. It's puzzling, but we have to find out what's wrong with our porpoises before it spreads. Also, they attract tourists, and as you'll have seen, the town is pretty quiet at the moment." He trailed off. "That's why we're here," Jada said. "Just tell us what you know." "Well, about 2 weeks ago, we started getting reports from fishermen down on the beach about porpoises acting peculiarly," he said. "Can you describe their odd behavior?" Reggie asked. Dr. Vludman frowned in concentration. "Most of the fishermen on our island are very secretive," he began. "They don't like to talk to officials. You see, our town is so small that everyone knows everyone else. You might have better luck since you don't have an official look." He glanced at Reggie's cargo shorts and the beat-up tennis shoes and Kate's leggings. "We like to be comfortable," said Cam, looking down at his clothes. "And anyway, we work in the field, hacking our way through dense forest, wading through swamps, and climbing mountains." Kate interrupted. "What about any unusual algae?" she asked. "Just what you would expect to find in these coastal waters," Dr. Vludman replied. He talked for a few more minutes, but he didn't have any answers. It looked as if the survival of the porpoises was in the hands of the science squad. They thanked Dr. Vludman and promised to let him know what they found. "Wait, one more thing," Dr. Vludman called just as the team was about to squeeze out of the tiny door. "I received a communication from the Coast Guard that a barge loaded with mining equipment drifted very close to our island some weeks ago. Apparently, it lost steering power. It would have been a disaster if the barge had tipped and that oily equipment had landed in our waters. Anyway, the crew worked on the steering overnight, and by the next morning it had vanished." "The mysterious vanishing barge," Kate said. "When did this happen?" 10 days before I sent the first porpoise report to Professor Q, said Dr. Vludman. "Okay, I'll need the coordinates of the barge's overnight location, its route here, and its final destination, said Kate as she opened a map app on her tablet and keyed in the information. Thank you, Dr. Vledman, Reggie said as he put his notes into his backpack. We'll be sure to tell Professor Q how helpful you've been. Chapter 3. 10 minutes later, while Reggie and Kate walked toward the ocean, Jada and Cam spotted a family returning from snorkeling. As they took off their snorkeling equipment, Jada approached the family. I bet you saw a lot of cool things down there, she said, smiling. A little boy piped up. Yeah, we saw the coral reefs. Did you know coral is a skeleton? We saw lots of skeletons. Who are you? Asked the boy's mother. We're scientists, said Jada. We've come to study the porpoises. The boy's sister's eyes widened on hearing about the porpoises. I saw something strange, she said. Really strange. What? Jada and Cam asked at the same time. Jada pulled out her tablet. Two things, actually, said the girl. Well, one was not so much seeing as not seeing. There weren't any fish on the coral reef. We didn't see one. Jada's ears pricked up. The girl continued. And then this porpoise swam right past us, and it looked hungry. It was really thin. I thought for a minute it might try to eat me. The children's mother looked at her daughter. Alarmed. You didn't tell me about this, she said, then turned toward Jada. Is there something wrong with the porpoises? Could we be in danger? Jada smiled reassuringly. No, I'm sure it's nothing serious. Just stay away from them for now. I'm sure everything will be fine. And thanks, said Cam as he waved goodbye to the family. Jada and Cam jogged to meet up with Kate and Reggie. Cam quickly filled them in on what the two children had said. Reggie looked out at the sapphire blue ocean. How strange that there were no fish. None at all. That would certainly explain the porpoise being thin. But where have the fish gone? He removed an empty glass bottle from his lab kit. What's that for? Kate asked. I think we should analyze the water, Reggie said. I have a feeling there's something in it that shouldn't be there, and it's driving the fish away. Is that your hypothesis? What you're trying to prove? Cam asked. That's right, Reggie said as he filled the bottle with a sample of seawater. With a marker, he labeled it surface beach water and added the date and time. He used a thermometer to measure its temperature, and then he also measured the air temperature. I need another sample from deeper in the ocean, and then I'll compare the two, he said, recording everything in his notebook. I've got an idea. Reggie and I can rent a boat to get the deep water sample, said Kate, pointing to a sign on the building farther down the beach that read Coral Reef Boats and Boards. You two can finish the interviews with the people on the beach. Try talking to those fishermen over there. Okay, see you later, Cam said as he and Jada walked toward the cluster of fishing boats and fishermen cleaning their catch. Hello, Jada began. We're wondering what has been happening to the porpoises. A girl over there just told us the strangest story about a hungry porpoise. Well, now, I used to see quite a few, said the fisherman. I take out my boat, Lucky Duck, at exactly 4 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I used to see 4 or 5 pods of porpoises, maybe 6 or 7 in each pod. So that is around 24 to 35 porpoises, Cam said. You're right. That's exactly what I used to see. The man smiled at Cam. Jada looked up from her notes and asked, what about now? Well, young lady, today I only saw 1 pod. 3 porpoises were in that one. And I also saw 2 porpoises swimming alone. That's very unusual. They had this vacant look in their eyes. It was strange. So today you saw 5 porpoises? Only 5? Cam was shocked. Exactly. That's just what I saw, the fisherman shrugged. Jada typed as fast as she could into her tablet. And did you happen to notice any other odd behavior? Not that I can recall this very minute, the fisherman continued, but that barge that came out of nowhere sure dredged up a mess, scaring our fish so badly that all of us headed home with empty coolers. The other fishermen grumbled in agreement. It said DDJ on the side of it, or at least I think that's what it said. It was hard to see, the fisherman continued. Thank you, Cam said. Do you mind if we come back if we have other questions? Anytime, said the fisherman. Well, that was interesting, said Jada as they walked up the beach. Cam nodded in agreement. Let's get a snack and wait for the others to get back, he suggested. They headed to a nearby crab shack and sat down at a table. Jada started snapping pictures of the view as they waited for their food to arrive. Meanwhile, the rented outboard motorboat rocked in the current as Kate put on her diving gear and pulled a camera and some sample bottles out of her backpack. When she attached the underwater camera and the water sample bottle to her diving belt, checked their location on her tablet, and compared it to the barge's location, they were on target. Okay, I'm ready, she told Reggie. Good luck and be careful. I'll be here when you come up. Kate saluted him, flipped backwards into the water, and disappeared into the depths. It's beautiful down here, she thought. She began snapping pictures and recording the temperature and her depth below the surface. She got the water sample and recorded the temperature again. Looking down, she realized the water below her looked murky and muddy, and there were no fish. In fact, she was the only thing swimming around. It was strange that there weren't any fish in this part of the ocean. After all, it wasn't that far offshore. Kate dove deeper. She could only just make out a structure that reminded her of playground equipment, a jungle gym and an enclosed slide. She snapped pictures that didn't expect to see anything because of the shadowy water. Then she slowly rose to the surface. It took you long enough, Reggie said when her head bobbed up from the ocean. Kate glared at him through the mask. Thank you, Kate, Reggie said. That's more like it, Kate said as she handed Reggie the water sample, thermometer, and camera. Then she removed her diving gear. Let's go back to the hotel so you can analyze this sample. I have a feeling it will be totally different from the first sample. I bet our deep seawater will have some answers. Also, I have pictures I want to scrutinize. That evening, the science squad met in Jada's room to report the findings. Cam and Jada filled in Kate and Reggie on the interviews they had conducted with the fishermen. As they ran through the part about the barge, Cam mentioned the DDJ initials the fishermen had seen on the side of the barge. DDJ, Kate muttered. Where have I seen that before? Wait! The rest of the science squad turned to look at Kate. I saw it this morning, she continued. That rude man who stole our taxi. His briefcase said DDJ on the side. I'm sure of it. Cam interrupted her. And in the crab shack, I smelled that odd smell again, a sort of citrus and cedar smell. You went to the crab shack without us, said Kate, disappointed. Hang on, said Jada. What about these photos I took at the crab shack? Maybe we should take a look at them. Cam, pass me your laptop. Jada quickly uploaded the pictures and began flicking through them one by one, looking at them carefully. Suddenly, she spotted something. Look there, she cried to the rest of the team. The team peered over her shoulder, and there in the background of her photo was the man from the taxi holding his briefcase. Sure enough, it had the letters DDJ on the side of it. Jada zoomed in and studied the man's picture closely. I think I'll use my picture recognition software to find out who this guy is. Ooh, wanted jewelry swindler. It took only a few minutes before Jada had a name. His name, at least his current one, is Drake Darkley. He's well known in the precious gems business, and not in a good way. He is wanted for scamming people out of their money through a company called Drake Darkley Jewels. He calls himself a miner and sold worthless silver mines. He's believable because he has a degree in mining engineering, she said. Drake Darkley Jewels, said Cam. Hang on, DDJ. That would make sense, said Reggie, as the mining information fits with my water analysis. I found ocean bed sediment in water hundreds of feet above the seabed, which would fit with mining activity. That would certainly explain where all the fish have gone. And look at these pictures, Kate said, showing the team the pictures of the structure she'd seen while diving. I know it's fuzzy, but it's from the area where the barge supposedly lost power. I bet that it's mining equipment. Come to think of it, Cam and I heard an interesting story when we ate at the crab shack, Jada said. Interesting, Cam said. I think it was more like someone was yanking your chain. For years, Jada began, ignoring Cam, a lady in the town told a story to anyone who would listen. It was about an underwater mine worth billions. Not millions, billions. The mine was supposed to be full of precious opals, but she never had anything to show for it, not one single opal. Then she just disappeared. The team listened as Jada continued, and we also got a tip about bright lights on the water. More recently, late at night, the crab shack owner had seen the lights a couple of times while he was locking up for the night. Well, it sounds like we've got our guy, said Cam, Drake Darkley, illegal jewel miner and ocean polluter. But what now? Now we prove it, said Kate, gathering her things. Chapter 5. On the way out of the inn, Cam made a phone call to Dr. Vludman and told him that if Drake Darkley were involved in illegal underwater mining, he would be breaking enough local, national, and global environmental regulations to keep himself locked away for a long, long time. He was also facing a hefty fine. Cam told him the science squad's plan, and Dr. Vludman promised to relay the information to the local police. The team rented the same boat as before, except this time they all went along. They sped along to their last location, and then they switched off the motor. Ready, Kate? Remember, we just need a few opal samples, the pictures of mining activity. And pictures of mining activity, Reggie said. Then, when we get back to shore, the police will have all they need to arrest Darkley. Wearing her diving equipment, Kate high-fived the team and flipped over backwards. Seconds later, she disappeared below the surface. Kate checked her depth dial, swimming down in a fluid motion so as not to alert anyone hiding in the mine. The Global Environmental Research Agency depended on her. She focused until she reached the playground. Close up, she saw it really was a mining equipment. The enclosed slide led down into the mine, but it was small, barely large enough for her and her dive tank. I bet there is another opening, she thought, but there's no time to look for it now. To reach the enclosed tunnel like a piece of equipment, she had to hold onto the bars of what seemed like the jungle gym and slowly, bar by bar, center herself over the tunnel-like enclosure. She made it. Stay calm, she told herself. Get the opal samples, take some pictures, and swim back to the boat and the rest of the squad. The tunnel led to an airlock, which Kate entered. The door locked behind her, and the water began to drain out. Once it had all drained away, a second door opened, and she found herself in a cave-like room, well lit and filled with equipment. She snapped pictures of it and close-ups of the serial and model numbers. A twinkling on the cave walls caught her eye. The opals! With her knife, she dug out a few of the sparkling particles and put them in a drawstring pouch. Suddenly, Kate saw movement to her right. A shadow emerged from the darkest recesses of the mine, then a figure moved toward her. It was Drake Darkley. Hoping the tunnel was the fastest exit, Kate spun back the way she came and somersaulted toward the tunnel. She heard grunts and running footsteps behind her, but her somersault was timed perfectly, and she landed at the airlock opening head first. Drake Darkley banged on the door, but it was already too late. The door had locked, and the airlock chamber was filling with water as Kate snapped pictures of him standing in the mine. As soon as the chamber was full of water, the second door opened, releasing Kate back into the ocean. Moving her flippers as fast as she could, she swam as fast as she dared, which felt very slow. Finally, she broke the surface, flipped off her mask, and yelled, "I got it!" to the rest of the team who were waiting in the boat. The first thing the team noticed as they sped back to shore was Dr. Vledman and several uniformed officers. Once they got off the boat, Kate retold her underwater ordeal and held up her pouch of opal chips and the underwater camera. After seeing the evidence, Dr. Vledman told the officers to arrest Drake Darkly as soon as he reached the mainland. "If you don't need us, we're going to crash for the night," Jada said. "You deserve much more than that," Dr. Vledman told them. "We'll talk later." Out on the terrace the next morning, the team called Professor Q. "I've already talked to Vluddy," she said. "Vluddy?" the team members mouthed silently to one another. "And it is a good thing he called me, since my science squad decided sleep was more important than updating me. But Professor Q, Kate had a terrifying experience and we were so worried and—" Cam began. "That was a joke, Cam," Professor Q said. "Surely you recognize a joke? Vluddy will dismantle the mine. Once the sediment settles on the seabed, the water will return to acceptable levels. The porpoise population is safe, and so is our environment, for now. Take a week off. This is another triumph for Jera." She hung up. "A week off? Surf's up. Let's go," said Reggie, but Kate was already out the door. The end. That was a good one.